Dust swirled around the wide front porch of Clay Thatcher's weather-worn ranch house as the sun slid behind the buttes, casting long, golden shadows over the cracked earth. It was the time of day he hated most. Not yet dark, but far enough from daylight that the silence pressed against him like a too-heavy blanket. The horses had been fed, the fence repaired, and the cattle pushed toward the upper pasture. All that was left was to drink alone and remember what he wished he could forget. It had been 14 months since the accident, since Evelyn, his wife, and Jacob, their son, had been taken from him in the kind of instant people write letters to God about. A runaway wagon, spooked horses, and Clay arriving only in time to watch the last breaths leave their broken bodies. Since then, the world had been gray. He tended the ranch out of habit more than hope, speaking to the livestock more than to any living soul. No friends, no church, just the ranch, the ghosts, and the whiskey. That night, he almost didn't see her. Clay had just walked back toward the barn when the crow on the fence post let out a shriek. Loud, urgent, unnatural. He turned, squinting into the distance. At first, he thought it was a mirage. The heat still rising from the earth made shapes shimmer. But as she stumbled closer, the figure resolved into something real. A woman. A girl, really, but hardened in some way that made her seem older than her years. She limped forward, barefoot, her dress ripped and caked with dirt, one arm hanging strangely at her side. Her face was smeared with dust and blood, and yet her eyes, wild, wide, locked with his. Not pleading, not afraid, just alive, barely, and desperate to stay that way. Clay moved slowly, instinct kicking in. "You all right?" he called, already knowing the answer. She tried to speak, but only gasped. He stepped down the porch and caught her just as her knees buckled. Inside the house, the light was dim, and the air smelled of tobacco and wood polish. Clay laid her on the couch and fetched a basin of water, a clean cloth, and the bottle of antiseptic he hadn't touched since his wife kept it stocked. Her ankle was badly twisted, her lip split, and a long, shallow gash crossed her left shoulder. A bullet graze, he reckoned, though she hadn't said a word. He cleaned the wound, wrapped her ankle, and gave her water, all in silence. Only after the worst was tended did she finally speak. "Thank you." Her voice was soft, rough around the edges like uncut wood. She shifted, trying to sit up straighter. Clay sat across from her, the old rocking chair creaking under his weight. "Name?" he asked. She hesitated, then said, "Lena." He waited, but she offered nothing more. "Well, Lena," Clay said, "you got about 10 kinds of hurt on you. Looks like trouble chased you a ways. Want to tell me where you came from?" She looked down, then toward the window. Outside, the sky had turned the color of rust and smoke. "Does it matter?" Clay didn't answer right away. He saw the edge in her eyes, the kind born from running, from fear too big to outrun. "Not tonight," he said. "You're safe here." That night, Lena slept in the spare room, Evelyn's sewing room, untouched since the funeral. Clay thought he'd never open it again. But something in the way Lena collapsed into the bed, too tired to even remove the rest of her torn dress, pushed past the rusted lock on his heart. He sat on the porch long after, a shotgun across his knees, and the crow still watching from the rail. She didn't run. In the morning, he made coffee and scrambled eggs. She ate like someone who hadn't in days, and Clay didn't ask questions. He didn't have to. Her eyes said enough, of violence, of escape, of pain she didn't yet have words for. When she tried to stand, her ankle gave out. "You're not going anywhere on that," Clay said, tilting his hat back. "Might as well rest." "I can't stay," she said quickly, panic rising. "He'll come looking." Clay narrowed his eyes. She froze again. Her fingers clenched around the coffee mug. "Man who thinks he owns me." There it was. Clay didn't ask for details. He didn't need them. In the West, there were always men like that. Men who thought women were property and used pain as a leash. What mattered was that Lena was here now, and she was terrified. Something stirred in him. Not pity, but purpose. It had been a long time since he'd felt anything close to it. "Let him come," Clay said. "Ain't the first bastard I've met." Over the next few days, Lena began to recover. Slowly, warily, she moved through the house, helping where she could despite her injury. She was quiet, watchful, but sharp, her hands steady when she folded linens, her eyes scanning the horizon whenever she passed a window. Clay noticed how she flinched at sudden noises but never complained. She asked little, expected less. And yet she changed the air in the house. She lit the stove again. She watered the plants Evelyn had let die in the corner. She even mended the hem of Clay's shirt one night without saying anything, just set it folded on the table with a nod. Something began to loosen in Clay. The grief didn't leave, but it shifted, making space for something else. He didn't speak of Evelyn or Jacob, but Lena never asked. Somehow, that was better than sympathy. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills again, Clay found Lena outside, leaning on the fence. The crow was nearby, hopping along the rail. "I like him," she said, nodding toward the bird. "He's mean," Clay muttered. She smiled for the first time. It caught him off guard. "You used to have a family," she said, not as a question, but a knowing. Clay stared at the horizon. "I did. I can feel in the house," she said, "like they're still there." He swallowed hard. "Some days I wish they were ghosts. At least then I'd see him." Lena didn't reply. She just stood beside him, silent and still. And in that moment, Clay understood. She wasn't just hiding. She was healing too, in her own way, the same way he was. Two broken souls caught in the wind, settling for a moment on the same patch of earth. But peace never lasts long in places like that. On the sixth night, a cloud of dust on the road warned Clay before the sound of hooves reached his ears. He stood, shotgun in hand, and met the rider halfway down the trail. A man in black, sharp-eyed, cruel mouth, with a revolver on his hip and a scar down one cheek. "I'm looking for someone," he said. "Girl, about yay high. Hurt her ankle. Probably limping." Clay didn't blink. "Ain't seen no one like that." The man smirked. "That's so, 'cause I got word she headed this direction. I don't like being lied to." Clay let the silence stretch, then said slowly, "I don't give a damn what you like." The tension crackled between them. Finally, the stranger tipped his hat. "She's mine, and I'll be back." Clay didn't answer. He just turned and walked back up the path. That night, he loaded his rifle and barred the door. Lena didn't protest. She simply nodded, her hands curling into fists as she sat beside the fire. Neither of them said what they were thinking, that tomorrow might bring blood, that one night of shelter might become something far more dangerous. But in the quiet, in the shared fear and the shared resolve, something deeper had been planted. She had come wounded and alone, expecting only a place to hide for the night. He had given her that, but she had already begun to give something back, not just life in the house, but in him, and by the next sundown, neither of them would ever be the same. The prairie sky turned gunmetal gray just as the last rays of sunlight vanished behind the low hills. Clouds rolled in heavy and quick, thick with rain and tension. A storm was brewing, one in the heavens and another inside the battered hearts of the grieving rancher and the wounded girl. Elias Hart watched the horizon from a front porch of his ranch house. The girl, Eva, stood a few feet behind him, arms crossed over her chest, her bruises beginning to purple beneath the lantern light. She hadn't said much since supper, only offered a clipped "thank you" after swallowing down the last of the beans he'd reheated. He knew the look she wore, the stiff neck, the clenched jaw. It was the look of someone who didn't trust the ground under their feet, someone who had learned that safety was an illusion. Elias had worn that look for months after the accident that took his wife and boy. Even now, it crept into his reflection when he caught himself off guard in the mirror. Grief had no schedule. It just lingered like smoke in the rafters. "You best get inside," he said, his voice gravelly. "Storm's close." Eva hesitated, then stepped inside. The moment she crossed the threshold, thunder cracked like a rifle shot, making her flinch visibly. Elias noticed the way she reflexively grabbed her arm, the one she'd favored since she arrived. A darker story lay beneath those bruises, and though she hadn't offered it, he knew what lived behind her silence. Fear, a past she couldn't shake. Maybe someone still looking for her. He latched the door and pulled the curtains. Rain began to patter against the tin roof, building to a steady roar. The storm was here, and neither of them would be sleeping. She was curled in the corner chair by the fireplace, eyes fixed on the flames, and he settled into the rocking chair opposite. A long silence fell between them. The wind howled, whistling through the cracks in the windows. Elias stirred the fire, adding another log. Then, as though the words had been waiting in the smoke all along, she spoke. "I wasn't planning to come here," she said softly. "Didn't even know where I was going." He looked up, met her eyes. "Sometimes it don't matter where, just that you get away." She nodded but didn't smile. "I ran. From him. From everything. My mama died when I was 10, and after that it was just me and him. He raised me mean, like a dog on a chain. I thought I could live like that, but one day I got tired of bleeding." Elias said nothing. He knew too well what happened to words offered too soon. They could feel like judgment. Or worse, pity. "He's still out there," she said. "Looking. He always said no one else would take me. That I come crawling back. You believe him?" "I used to." Another silence. Then she asked, "You got family?" "Had." She looked at him, studying his profile in the firelight. "Wife and a boy," he said. "Rachel and Samuel. Lost them last spring. Wagon flipped in the rain. I wasn't there." Her face softened. "I'm sorry." "Me too." The storm outside pounded harder. The wind screamed like a spirit loose from the grave. "I guess I ain't never talked about them like that," Elias admitted. "Not out loud." "It helps," she said, her voice gentle. He nodded. "Yeah." The fire popped, and they both flinched, then chuckled quietly at themselves. Then came a knock. It was faint, barely audible beneath the storm, but unmistakable. Elias rose slowly, hand instinctively reaching for the rifle propped beside the door. Eva stood, panic wide in her eyes. "No one knows I'm here," she whispered. "Stay back," he said. Another knock, this time louder, more insistent. Elias opened the door a sliver, rifle ready. A man stood outside, soaked through. Tall, lean, mean in the eyes. Hat pulled low. He didn't flinch at the sight of the gun. "Looking for someone," the man said. Elias stepped fully into the doorway. "Ain't no one here but me." "I don't think so," the man replied. Lightning lit up the man's face, and Elias saw the scar running from ear to jaw. Eva had never described him, but he knew in his bones, that this was the one. The dog she'd run from. The ghost that hadn't stayed buried. "You should leave," Elias said. "She's mine." "She ain't," Elias replied, voice cold. "Not now. Not ever." The man narrowed his eyes. "You don't know what you're stepping into, old man." Elias leveled the rifle. "I know exactly what I'm doing." The man hesitated, calculating. Then, without another word, he turned and disappeared into the storm. Elias shut the door and bolted it. When he turned, Eva was trembling. "I told you he'd come," she said. "You're safe now," he said. "Ain't no one coming through that door." But safety wasn't something you could promise. Not really, and they both knew it. That night, they stayed by the fire, too afraid to sleep. Elias loaded more rounds into his rifle. Eva sharpened the small blade she carried. Outside, the storm raged on. In the morning, the land was drenched, and the sun broke through like a blessing. They checked the perimeter. No sign of him. But his tracks were there, etched in the mud. Headed south. He hadn't given up, just biding his time. Inside, over coffee and cornbread, Eva looked across the table at Elias. "I can't stay," she said. "You don't have to go. If I stay, I put you in danger." He shook his head. "You didn't bring danger. It was always out there. All you did was survive it." She looked down at her hands. "I don't want to keep running." "Then don't. I don't know how to stop." Elias leaned forward. "You stop by fighting for something worth keeping." She looked up at him, then really looked and saw not just the grieving rancher, but the man still standing, still ready to protect something fragile. A girl he barely knew. A memory he hadn't buried. A life he wasn't done with. "I'll stay," she said softly, "but only if I can help." "You already have," he said. That night, she cleaned out the barn, sorted old tools, repaired fences. He taught her to ride one of the calmer horses. Showed her how to lead with confidence, not fear. As the days passed, the air between them softened. She laughed once, really laughed, and it caught him off guard. The sound hadn't filled the house in so long. It felt like music rising from an old record. Cracked but beautiful. One evening, as the sky blushed with the color of dusk. Elias stood beside her as they looked over the field. Wildflowers had begun to bloom where the rain had broken the dry soil. Life pushing through. Place doesn't feel so quiet anymore, he said. Neither do I, she whispered. But they both knew it wasn't over. He'd come back, the man in the storm. And next time, it wouldn't be to talk. That was the weight they carried together now. Not just grief, not just fear, but the bond of two souls who had refused to break, who had met each other in the worst of nights and somehow, against every odd, found something like peace. It wasn't love. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But it was something close. Something sacred. A reason to wake up. A reason to try. And when the next reckoning came, as it surely would, they would face it together. That was the deal. The unspoken vow. And that was enough. The morning after the storm broke with an unnatural stillness. The violence of the night, marked by gunfire, blood, and raw emotion, had faded into a golden sunrise that painted the world in soft hues of promise. The ranch was no longer just a burial ground for past sorrows, nor merely a stronghold against danger. It was now something reborn, like the first breath after nearly drowning. Sam Butler stood at the edge of his porch, the scent of wet earth and gunpowder still clinging to the air. Behind him, the wounded girl he had sheltered, now a young woman he saw with new eyes, was inside tending the hearth as if it were her own. They hadn't spoken much since the encounter with her pursuer, now buried quietly beneath the cottonwoods with the others who'd met their end on this soil. But words weren't needed, not yet. There was something sacred in the silence they shared, the kind that only existed between souls bound by fire and fear and survival. Sam had lost everything once. His wife, Anna, had died slowly, cancer eating away at her while he tried in vain to hold her together with prayer and grit. Their son had gone next, a senseless accident with a bronco not yet broken. After burying them, Sam had buried himself in the work. The cattle didn't care if he smiled. The wind didn't mourn. But when Lily stumbled onto his land, half dead and hiding from something worse, the rancher who had forgotten how to feel began to live again. Now, he was a man divided, one foot still planted in the life he thought he had let go, and the other cautiously stepping into whatever this new bond might mean. Lily emerged from the cabin, her bare feet brushing across the planks. Her wounds had started to heal, though she carried more inside her than even Sam could guess. There were bruises not visible, emotional wreckage for months, maybe years of running, hiding, being used, and discarded like trash. But she was still standing. She met Sam's gaze with a quiet determination that hadn't been there before. "I fixed your coat," she said simply, holding out the mended wool with a few crooked stitches along the shoulder. He accepted it with a nod. "Thank you." She hesitated, then walked down the steps and stood beside him. The land stretched before them, golden grass, dark soil, and the morning mist curling around the base of the distant hills like a secret waiting to be told. "Why haven't you asked me to leave?" she asked. Sam didn't answer immediately. He rubbed the worn edge of the coat in his hands. "Because I don't want you to." That hung between them like a fragile thread. She turned toward him, eyes sharp. "You don't know who I am." "Not really. I could be dangerous." "I know who you are," he replied. "You're someone who ran, someone who fought, someone who didn't give up." Her lips parted, as if to argue, but the words wouldn't come. No one had ever described her like that before. They spent the day tending to the ranch. It was an unspoken agreement, returning to routine, grounding themselves in the ordinary. Sam showed her how to reinforce the fencing, how to feed the horses the right mix of grain and hay. She asked questions, smart ones. She wasn't afraid to get her hands dirty. He noticed the way she moved, always alert, always watching. She wasn't used to being safe. That kind of habit didn't die easily. Later, while they were repairing a collapsed portion of the barn roof, Sam found himself watching her. Not just her movements, but the way the sun danced on her skin, the faint crease of concentration between her brows. Something in his chest stirred, like coals catching flame. "You ever think about staying?" he asked, casually tossing the question out like it didn't matter. Lily looked up sharply. "Staying? Yeah, here, with me. Not just for a night or a few days. For good." Her expression darkened with uncertainty. I wouldn't know how. Sam climbed down from the ladder and sat on a bale of hay. I didn't either. After Anna and Jake, I didn't think I'd ever want to share this place again. But something's different now. You're different. And I think you've already started fixing more than my coat. She stared at him for a long moment, her eyes glistening. You don't know what I've done. What I've seen. Doesn't matter. You're here now. That's what counts. Lily walked over and sat beside him. What if I mess everything up? Sam shrugged. Then we fix it. Together. It was the most intimate thing he'd said to another human in years. And she didn't flinch. She smiled, soft and hesitant. And in that moment, something inside both of them clicked into place. Not love, not yet, but trust. A seed buried deep in soil newly tilled. Weeks passed, then months. The seasons turned. Winter brought quiet mornings and long nights by the fire. Lily learned to ride better than Sam could have imagined. She helped deliver calves, repaired the windmill, and found laughter again, short, surprised bursts that startled them both. Sam began writing again in the little leather-bound journal Anna had given him before she died. He wrote about Lily, about the way she sang to the horses when she thought no one could hear, or how she never left her plate with food unfinished, as if still afraid it would vanish. One morning, as the snow melted into spring, Sam woke to find Lily standing on the ridge behind the house, overlooking the valley. She held a piece of paper in her hand, a letter. He approached slowly, heart beating hard. Everything all right? She nodded. I wrote them. The people I ran from. Told them I'm not afraid anymore. I've got someone watching my back now. Sam's eyes softened. You sure about that? I'm sure. She folded the letter and lit it with a match. They watched it burn together, the smoke twisting into the sky. That night, Sam opened a small box he'd kept hidden beneath the floorboards. Inside was a simple silver necklace, Anna's. He offered it to Lily wordlessly. Her fingers trembled as she took it. She would have liked you, Sam said quietly. She's part of this place. I feel her sometimes. Like she's letting me be here. She is. They sat on the porch long into the night, their shoulders touching, the stars above like scattered promises. By summer, Lily had taken over much of the ranch's bookkeeping and started a vegetable garden behind the house. She painted the barn doors red. Sam never would have thought of it, but it fit. They built a new chicken coop and fixed the wind vane that had squealed in the wind for years. For the first time since tragedy struck, Sam felt like the land was alive again, because he was. Lily still had nightmares. Sam still woke, sometimes reaching for a wife who wasn't there. But the grief didn't crush him the way it used to. It had found a place beside hope, no longer smothering it. One night, as they sat by the fire, Lily took Sam's hand. I was half dead when you found me, she whispered. You gave me a place to rest. A night of peace. That one night saved me. And now, he looked at her, eyes steady. Now you've saved me, she finished. Sam pulled her close, holding her like a man who'd nearly drowned and found land. He didn't speak, didn't need to. Everything he thought he'd lost was there, in the quiet strength of her arms and a heartbeat he could feel against his chest. She hadn't just found shelter in his home. She had given him his life back.